All right, so get this. We're diving into the story of the Transcontinental Railroad.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is. It is. It's the 1860s. America,
Yeah,
on the verge of civil war.
right.
And yet they're trying to build this railroad connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific.
I mean, that just seems impossible, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Especially when you think about the technology back then. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
hand tools, explosives, and just pure grit.
Yeah, against some of the most challenging landscapes you could imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the engineering, right?
No,
It was the politics,
with finances.
the personalities. It's a story full of twists and turns.
Definitely.
So to kind of guide us through this, we're going to be looking at American History Tellers, the Transcontinental Railroad, Work of Giants, Part 1.
Okay.
It's a really great podcast episode that really captures the drama and the scale of this whole thing.
What's so fascinating to me is how this project, I mean, it was born out of this desire to connect a fractured nation, right?
Yeah.
But it ended up kind of revealing so much about America itself, its ambition, its ingenuity,
Yeah.
but also like its capacity for greed and exploitation.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so before we get to the Transcontinental Railroad itself,
Okay.
we need to understand this railroad fever that kind of gripped America in the early 1800s.
Yeah,
And it all started with that first American train journey back in 1830.
that's right. It's hard to overstate how excited people were about that. I mean, the train represented progress.
Right.
It was so much faster than those horse-drawn carriages.
Yeah.
And almost immediately, people started to imagine, well, what if we could connect whole cities? What if we could reach the Pacific?
Right. And then, as if on cue, gold is discovered in California in 1848.
Yeah,
So suddenly reaching the Pacific wasn't just this like romantic idea, it was an economic necessity.
absolutely. Put yourself in the shoes of a gold seeker in the 1850s.
Okay.
Your options to get to California are pretty brutal,
Yeah.
right? You've got a 6-month journey by wagon across some seriously dangerous terrain, or a perilous sea voyage around the tip of South America.
Yeah, neither of those sound very appealing.
No, not at all. Both of them full of danger. There was a shortcut through Panama.
Yeah.
You could sail there, cross the isthmus by canoe and mule, then catch another ship.
Okay.
But it was still super risky, with diseases like yellow fever running rampant.
Yeah. So a faster and safer way to get to California is needed. And that's where Theodore Judah comes in, right?
Yes, yes. Theodore Judah, this kind of obsessive engineer,
Okay.
the man who became, well, fixated on the idea of a transcontinental railroad.
Yeah.
By his late 20s, he had already made a name for himself as a skilled railroad builder. But,
Yeah.
this transcontinental project became his passion, his everything.
So he wasn't just a dreamer, he was a man of action.
Absolutely, yeah. He was convinced that this transcontinental railroad was not only possible, but essential for America. So he throws himself into this project, writing pamphlets to get people on board, lobbying Congress.
Oh, yeah.
And he kept saying, we need to survey routes. We need to survey routes.
But the political climate in the 1850s, I mean, it wasn't exactly calm.
No, not at all.
Slavery was a huge issue, and it kind of cast a shadow over everything, including the railroad.
It did. The whole debate about the railroad got tied up with slavery.
Right.
Each side, the North and the South, they were fighting for a route that would benefit them, right?
Of course.
So you have this Southern senator arguing passionately for a Southern route, saying it would open up trade with Asia, cement the South's economic power.
And I'm assuming the Northern senator had a counter-argument.
Oh, absolutely. He said a Northern route was way more practical
Okay.
and that it would help unify the country, connect existing railroad lines.
So even before they laid a single rail, this railroad was a battleground for all these deeper conflicts.
Yeah. It really shows how even something like an infrastructure project can get so political. It reflects all these fault lines in a society.
Right, right. But through all this, Judah's focused on this one big obstacle,
Yes.
the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Oh, yeah. And it wasn't just their size,
No, I mean, they had a reputation.
They were unforgiving. Think about the Donner Party.
Oh, yeah.
Those pioneers stranded in the mountains during that horrible winter, resorting to cannibalism to survive.
Yeah, that's a chilling reminder of just how dangerous those mountains were.
It is.
So how did Judah convince anyone that building a railroad through that was even possible?
Well, he was relentless, maybe a little bit crazy.
Okay.
He spent months exploring the Sierras, surveying routes, just convinced that a passable path could be found.
He sounds very determined.
He was. And while investors were still skeptical, Judah knew this project needed more than just engineering.
Right.
It needed a united front, especially from the people who would benefit the most.
So he turned to the west.
Exactly. In 1859, he helps organize this Pacific Railroad Convention,
Okay.
bringing together people from all these western states to advocate for the project.
Right.
It was a big step. It showed that this desire for the railroad wasn't just California.
Yeah.
It was the whole West.
But let's be honest. Convincing people to invest in a railroad through the Sierra Nevada in the 1860s?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that must have been tough.
It was a tough sell. They were worried about the risks, the costs, the sheer scale of it all.
Yeah.
You know, Judah faced skepticism everywhere he went, but he knew he needed more than just speeches and surveys.
Right.
He needed someone with deep pockets.
Yeah, someone willing to take a gamble.
Exactly.
And that's where the big four come in.
Yeah, the big four: Huntington, Hopkins, Crocker, and Stanford.
Legendary names.
They each brought something different to the table, you know?
Okay.
Huntington, he was the money guy. Hopkins was the organizer.
Okay.
Crocker, he was the construction expert.
Right.
And Stanford, he was the politician.
Quite the team.
They were a force to be reckoned with.
So how did Judah manage to convince them to invest in this? Because it still seemed like a pretty crazy idea.
Well, he appealed to their business sense,
Mm.
told them about the potential profits from the Nevada silver rush.
Okay.
But his real genius was proposing a wagon road alongside the railroad.
I see.
This gave them a way to make money right away, even if the railroad took a while.
Smart.
It was a brilliant strategy. Immediate gains and the promise of long-term riches.
So Judah finally has the backing he needs.
Yeah,
It seems like everything's falling into place.
right.
But then Civil War breaks out.
Oh, yeah. It was a huge turn of events. Could have easily derailed the whole thing.
For sure.
But ironically, the war actually created an opportunity.
How so?
Well, with the southern states out of Congress,
Right.
the main opposition to a northern route was gone.
I see.
So this political stalemate suddenly became a clear path forward.
And Judah, being Judah, he took advantage of that, right?
Oh, absolutely. He was relentless, lobbying Congress, presenting a plan, and he even got Lincoln on board.
And Lincoln was a big supporter of infrastructure, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He saw the potential of this railroad, not just to connect the country physically, but to heal those divisions.
Exactly. And in 1862, the Pacific Railway Act is passed, and his vision becomes law.
In this act, it was huge, right? It provided everything they needed, the legal framework, the land grants, the bonds.
It laid out the terms of the race, you know.
Okay.
2 companies, the Central Pacific building east from Sacramento,
Right.
and this new company, the Union Pacific, building west from the Missouri River.
So a competition.
A race to lay as much track as possible, fueled by government money and this hunger for land and profit.
But there was a catch, wasn't there? Something about the first 40 miles of track?
Oh, yeah. The 40-mile rule. They had to lay 40 miles of track before any federal funding kicked in.
So that created a sense of urgency.
Absolutely. A mad scramble to get those subsidies. It really set the stage for this cutthroat competition that would define the whole project.
So Judah finally gets his dream. The
Oh.
act is passed. The money's there. The Central Pacific is ready to go.
Yeah.
It must have felt amazing.
He had, as he said, drawn the elephant. But he didn't realize that controlling that elephant, that would be much harder than he thought.
Because things weren't exactly smooth sailing back in California with the Big Four.
No, not at all.
Their focus on profit, it started to clash with Judah's vision, didn't it?
It did. Judah, he was the idealistic engineer, right? He wanted to build a railroad that was, a masterpiece.
Okay.
The Big Four, they were all about the money, even if it meant cutting corners.
And they gave it the construction contract to Crocker's own company, did they?
They did, yeah. It was a pretty clear conflict of interest.
Yeah.
But they were good at working the system, you know.
And then there was that whole thing with the foothills.
Oh, yeah, the foothills. To get more government bonds,
Right.
they moved the designated start of the foothills closer to Sacramento
Why would they do that?
because it meant they could claim more mountainous terrain, which meant more subsidies.
Clever.
It was a brilliant move. Even if it was a little unethical, it made them a lot richer.
So how did Judah take all of this?
Oh, he was furious. He saw it as a betrayal.
Yeah.
They were sacrificing quality and integrity for profit.
Right.
Things came to a head when the Big Four gave Judah an ultimatum: put up more money or get out.
So it was put up or shut up?
Pretty much. And Judah, he decided to fight back.
Right.
He went to the East Coast to raise the funds to buy them out, to take back control.
Wow.
was a bold move, could have changed everything,
Yeah.
but, fate had other plans.
And that's where we'll pick up next time. But before we go, I want you to think about this.
Mm.
Did the arrival of the Big Four, with their focus on profit, did that fundamentally change the Transcontinental Railroad?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what if Judah had succeeded? Would the railroad have been different? Would it have been closer to his vision?
We'll explore those questions as we continue our journey through this incredible story. Welcome back. So last time, we left Theodore Judah with this big decision.
Yeah.
Raise the money to buy out the Big Four or risk losing control of the Central Pacific.
Right. It's a real turning point, It makes you think, what if he had succeeded?
Yeah, what if? Would the railroad have been totally different?
Yeah, maybe more focused on engineering, less on, making a quick buck.
Right, but unfortunately we'll never know for sure.
No, because
Tragedy struck.
it did.
Judah, while trying to regain control, he contracts yellow fever in Panama
Oh, no.
and dies in New York. He was only 37.
That's so young. It's a real reminder of the human cost of all of this,
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the big picture, the engineering feats.
Right.
But this was a story of people, too.
Absolutely. Their hopes, their ambitions, their losses.
Yeah, and his death left a huge void in the Central Pacific.
For sure. And remember, at this point, the Union Pacific, they were still struggling to even get started.
Right, they were having trouble finding investors.
Yeah, their route wasn't even finalized.
And they didn't have someone like Judah
No, they didn't.
to really champion the project.
So you've got one company reeling from this loss and the other one just stuck.
So what happens next?
Well, on the Union Pacific side, a new player enters the scene, Dr. Thomas Clark Durant.
Durant. That name rings a bell, but I don't associate him with railroads.
Yeah, you're right. He wasn't an engineer like Judah. Durant was a doctor, actually.
Oh, wow.
But he had this sharp mind for business, and he saw the Union Pacific as this huge opportunity.
For profit?
Well, for wealth and power, let's say.
Sounds like he was more aligned with the Big Four than with Judah.
Maybe so, but Durant, he had this boldness, this cunning that even they might have, been impressed by.
So he takes control of the Union Pacific.
He does, uses his money and his connections to get things moving.
But wasn't Durant known for being, a little shady in his dealings?
Let's just say he wasn't afraid to bend the rules. Stock manipulation, bribes. He even created fake companies to inflate construction costs.
So skimming off the top.
You could say that.
So while the Central Pacific is dealing with internal issues and losing their leader, the Union Pacific is being driven forward by this force of nature.
Yeah, who's more interested in his own gains than the nation's benefit, maybe.
So we have these two companies, both with their own problems,
Yeah.
but both determined to win this race.
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of obstacles did they face?
Well, for the Union Pacific, building across the Great Plains, that meant dealing with vast distances,
Okay.
unpredictable weather, and sometimes even hostile Native American tribes.
Right, they saw the railroad as a threat to their way of life.
They did, yeah. It's easy to forget this project wasn't just about laying tracks.
No, it was about disrupting lives, encroaching on territories.
It was a manifestation of manifest destiny.
Yeah.
This belief that America expanding westward was inevitable, divinely ordained even.
But for the tribes, it was devastating.
Absolutely. A loss of land, a loss of sovereignty.
And for the Central Pacific, they still had the Sierra Nevada to contend with.
Yeah, those mountains were always there. But they had another problem. A labor shortage.
Right, all those gold and silver mines were drawing workers away.
Exactly. So they had to look elsewhere for manpower.
And where did they turn?
To Chinese immigrants. Thousands of them.
This is where the story takes a really interesting turn.
It does. These workers, driven by poverty and unrest back home, they come to America seeking opportunity.
Right.
And they face discrimination, hardship, all of that.
Yeah. And at first, people didn't think they could handle the work, right?
No, they were seen as too small, too weak.
But the Central Pacific needed them, right?
Desperately.
Yeah.
So they took a chance.
And what happened?
Those Chinese workers proved everyone wrong. They were incredibly hardworking, disciplined, skilled.
Okay.
They adapted quickly to the tough conditions, the danger. They were essential in overcoming some of the biggest obstacles.
Like those tunnels they built through the Sierra Nevada.
Yes, the tunnels. Think about that, using hand drills and explosives, blasting through solid rock.
Wow.
Sometimes hundreds of feet in the air, in freezing weather, snowstorms.
It's hard to even imagine.
It is. Their contribution was huge, but their story is also one of exploitation.
Right. They were paid less, treated worse.
Exactly. It's a reminder that American progress, it often came at a cost for certain groups.
Absolutely. So we have these two companies using very different labor forces racing towards each other.
Yeah.
Did their approaches to building the railroad differ too?
They did in some ways. The Central Pacific, because of the mountains, they focused on meticulous engineering.
Okay.
Slow, careful, but high quality.
Like they were building a monument.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The Union Pacific, on the other hand, they had all that flat land.
Right.
So they were all about speed, efficiency.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes they cut corners, sacrificed quality to get ahead.
So two different philosophies.
You could say that, and you can even see it in the tracks themselves. The Central Pacific's tracks, they were known for being durable, precise.
Yeah.
The Union Pacifics, they were often hastily built, needed constant repairs.
So as they got closer, the competition must have gotten even more intense.
Oh, it did for sure. Every mile of track meant more land, more money.
Right.
It became a race to see who could get the most rewards.
And I imagine that kind of pressure didn't always bring out the best in people.
No, it didn't. Worker safety often took a backseat to speed and profit.
So it's important to remember the human cost of this whole project, the sacrifices that were made.
It is. And as we approach the finish line, that meeting of the rails, it's crucial to keep that in mind.
Yeah, the awe-inspiring achievement, but also the very real sacrifices.
Because the Transcontinental Railroad, it wasn't just about connecting two coasts. It
Yeah.
was about connecting a nation that was still figuring itself out.
And that story, it's way more complicated than just a simple tale of triumph.
It is. And in those complexities, those contradictions, that's where the real lessons lie.
We're back, and man, the tension is high.
You can feel it, right?
Like two heavyweights going at it.
Yeah, the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific, neck and neck.
Driven by ambition, government money, and maybe a little bit of pride too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a Wild West showdown, but with trains instead of guns.
I like that. But it wasn't all glory, was it?
No.
I mean, we talked about how that race to the finish, it came at a cost, especially for the workers.
Especially the Chinese workers on the Central Pacific. They were facing discrimination, tough conditions, and this rush to build, it only made things more dangerous.
Yeah, a lot of them paid the ultimate price for this railroad.
Yeah.
You know, their lives lost in explosions, landslides, all kinds of accidents.
And their sacrifices, often they were overlooked, forgotten in all the celebrations.
It's a sobering thought, for sure. But even amidst all that danger, that pressure to build, there were still these incredible feats of engineering.
Oh, yeah. Like the Dale Creek Bridge, built by the Union Pacific out in Wyoming. This massive wooden bridge, over 150 feet high, spanning this huge gorge.
Wow.
And they built this in the 1860s.
I mean, no cranes, no power tools.
Human skill and determination.
And the Central Pacific, they had their own engineering marvels. Right?
Wow, yeah, those tunnels through the Sierra Nevada.
Oh, man, those tunnels.
The Summit Tunnel, over 1,600 feet long, carved through solid granite. Just think about that for a second.
It's hard to even comprehend.
These hand drills, explosives. It was the longest tunnel in North America at that time.
So both companies pushing the limits of what was possible, each in their own way.
Yeah, and as they got closer, that tension, it must have been unbelievable.
You can almost picture it, right?
Yeah, two crews working day and night, racing towards each other, knowing that every foot of track they laid brought them closer to victory.
And finally it happens.
May 10th, 1869.
Promontory Summit, Utah.
The two railroads, they meet.
The Golden Spike is driven in, connecting the East Coast and the West Coast for the first time.
What a moment.
The moment that changed America forever.
Yeah, you can't overstate the impact of this. It revolutionized transportation. Travel times were cut drastically. The West was opened up for settlement, development.
It really was a turning point.
It was, but like we've been talking about, it's important to remember how we got here.
The good and the bad.
The corruption, the exploitation, the environmental damage, that's all part of the legacy too.
The Transcontinental Railroad, it's not just a simple story of triumph.
It's more complicated than that. It's a story about ambition, ingenuity, but also greed and sacrifice.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
It makes us think, makes us question.
It reminds us that progress, it always comes at a price.
And that's something we should never forget, right?
Never.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the Transcontinental Railroad. It's been a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
A story full of twists and turns, highs and lows. We hope you found it as captivating as we did.
We hope it made you think, made you question.
and maybe even inspired you to learn more about this incredible chapter in American history.
There's so much more to discover, so many stories to uncover.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and until next time, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.